We have Mr. Beerud Sheth, Chief Executive Officer, Webaroo. Can we have him on the stage, sir?
Hi, morning. So I want to, I look at the agenda for most of the session. A lot of the excitement in India, a lot of the good news is e-commerce is growing dramatically. The not so good news, of course, is, the path to profitability. And of course, we all believe we'll get there. There's a lot of money, investors are pouring in a ton of cash and so on. With the faith, it's almost an article of faith that it will happen. It's happened in the US, in China, and I guess it'll happen in India as well. And I just wanted to sort of just spend some of my time focusing on the other half of the discussion, saying, okay, what happens even as business grows? How do we, what are some of the things that business have to focus on to drive profitability, or at least get closer to it? And it's not just profitability for its own sake, but it can actually accelerate growth even faster, right? Because the less you're burning, the more you can invest in growth as well. So first, just kind of, picking up from where Ravi was discussing about US, China, and Japan. This has been the e-commerce growth for India. So for this year, 2014, it's about 77,000 crores, about $15 billion, give or take. Okay, and that's been great. I mean, it's been a fairly healthy growth rate, and that continues to grow well. If you look at it, a surprising aspect, if you break out this revenue, a surprising aspect is travel is a disproportionately high share of the Indian e-commerce market right now. If you compare that with China, for example, so if it's 70-30 travel and other things, in China it's probably the reverse, right? Retail is or other shopping broadly, and other products would be a much higher portion. Travel is much smaller. So a lot more growth yet to happen. Of course, I think you can attribute it to the fact that travel is just virtual goods, right? There's no physical goods, there's no logistics, no delivery, no shipping. You don't have to worry about, you don't have to deal with any of the infrastructure challenges you have in India. So travel is bound to be an easier category, even more so in India than elsewhere. But, all the other buckets there, sort of e-tailing, financial services or other products, I mean, they have to solve the real world challenges to take its rightful share of e-commerce. So if you look at it sort of under the hood, and these numbers are sort of a average across a bunch of Indian e-commerce companies, okay, and also a blended average across both the marketplace model and the retail model, if you will. Meaning, in the marketplace model, the e-commerce site takes no inventory, and the margins tend to be higher versus in a, if you take inventory, take stock, and then deliver it. So if you look at it, online travel actually looks pretty good. Let's start with that one first. The ASPs are higher, right? Whether it's a train ticket, bus ticket, or something. The average selling price is about 7,000 rupees. And then you look at the components of it, right? The cost of goods, right? This is the actual amount that goes to the hotel or the airline or the bus service, as the case may be. Payment processing, delivery, of course, there's no delivery, it's a virtual good. And then discounts, and the biggest, user acquisition. I mean, this number has come down a lot over the years. Now it's just almost second nature. Any of us who traveled here from out of town probably just bought a ticket online and just did it, and there wasn't, user acquisition costs have declined dramatically, making it a sort of profitable business at the end, okay? But not so, in fact, not even close on the sort of shopping side, the e-tailing side, right? ASPs are a lot lower. And even though the gross margin, right, meaning the ASP minus COGS, the cost of goods, so it's about 15% on average. Now, again, like I said, it's a blended average, right? Electronics is much lower. It's in the mid-single digits, but fashion and apparel tend to be much higher. So think of it as a midpoint number, if you will. So even though the average margins are higher, gross margins are higher, about 15%, the costs are substantial, right? I mean, first and foremost is user acquisition cost, and I think I would club discounts almost in the same category. So between those two, there's about 35% of the cost accounted for that, and 10% for sort of the operations aspect of it, leading to substantial negative margins. Okay, and now of course, over time, people believe that this will mature, this will change. So let's compare this, right? Sort of really substantially negative margins. Compare that to a more mature market, and what happens? So this is now from the U.S., right? And what happens over time is not that the negative margins disappear altogether, but you get a lot of repeat transactions, repeat shoppers, right? Once the habit is formed, if you've shopped at your favorite site for 1 or 2 times, chances are you'll keep going back again and again. If you've saved your credit card there, chances are you'll just do the one-click shopping, right? Or your favorite mobile wallet. So we are all creatures of habit, and once we form our habits, people tend to, unless if the site screws up, if they don't deliver, or barring sort of situations like that, the repeat usage kind of goes up. And this is what everybody's betting on in the space, saying, okay, just acquire them now, it's a land grab, even if it's unprofitable, and over time, as they repeat, certainly the big difference between the left and the right graph is your acquisition cost disappears, right? When you have repeat shoppers, doesn't cost you anything to acquire them. You just have to keep them there and keep them happy, and when they need it again, you kind of bring them back. So this is the way, this is the path to profitability. This is how the e-commerce business can get there, and they may still be unprofitable on the front end, but by doing better things over time, keeping customers, retaining them, engaging them, getting them to come back for more, is when you make it up over time. Okay, so now if we look at it, right? Say in the Indian context for e-commerce companies, you say these are the 3 big buckets of your costs. Okay, and how do you, to get the business profitable? You say, okay, let's start with cost of goods. Well, the problem is you can't do much with that, right? It's an external variable. It depends on manufacturing and supply, demand, all kinds of different things. It is what it is. It's hard for an e-commerce business to, let's say, impact the price of manufacturing a phone, right? That depends on a bunch of, so it's mostly an external variable. Can't do much about that. Cost of acquisition, again, it's, you can run better marketing campaigns, you can get better at SEO, SEM, but everybody else is doing that too, right? And again, sort of depends on supply and demand of ad inventory, conversion rates, optimization, and so on and so forth. And the biggest factor, of course, is, how much money are VCs continuing to pour, investors continuing to pour into e-commerce companies. So ultimately, you're just competing for, the same sort of eyeballs, the same amount of attention from users. You're competing for that. And again, it just, yes, it's a very, very important component, but it also feels like a huge external variable, right? If somebody else wants to spend more to drive growth, okay, you got to compete with that. The price just went up. If IPL TV ad goes up because other advertisers want to do it, again, the price just kind of goes up. So if you look at these 3 big buckets of cost, the only one that you have complete and total control over is sort of the cost of your operations, right? Everything that happens between the click that the customer clicked on your website, the buy button, off to when you collect the payment. Between that click and collect, everything that happens in there is entirely in your control, right? Your logistics, your operations, your fulfillment, your warehouse, your payment collection method, cash on delivery, returns, inventory, stock, all of that sort of is up to you and every company. And it's kind of funny, a lot of these e-commerce companies, much as they are sort of technology companies, they are actually even bigger sort of logistics, operations, warehousing management companies. I mean, some of the largest e-commerce companies, they may have like hundreds of engineers, but tens of thousands of logistics and operations people for fulfillment, right? So what is the head of HR focusing on? I mean, clearly, look at the amount of attention it takes on the operations side. So I think if you say, okay, that's the big area in which you can impact it, okay, and if you do that well, right, there are some obvious things, the cost of delivery, the delivery time, which impacts customer satisfaction, which affects, repeat usage, right? That's the holy grail. You want customers to be happy and keep coming back. That's why you've seen a lot of these, press releases recently about, 2-day deliveries, 1-day delivery, same-day delivery, and I think I recently read about like a 2-hour delivery. Companies are sort of racing to do that because that's, becomes one of those competitive differentiators that companies can focus on. Of course, the amount of overhead, the staff that you manage, the amount of stock you keep, I mean, all of these could get better, driving, improving profitability. So how does, so we work we've been working with a lot of e-commerce companies, and as we look at, okay, what drives the efficiency around fulfillment and order management and operations, and what you find is, it's just and especially in India, I mean, it's just massive people-intensive, asset-intensive businesses, right, on the operation side. You have a ton of people, you have a ton of objects, and then there's a ton of vehicles, and just keeping track of who's where, when, why, and as things change, which in India, I think Murphy must be an Indian, right? Anything that can go wrong does go wrong, and so you need the dynamic sort of adjustment. Okay, you happen to be here, but the customer is now in his office, so he has to go there and has to, so all of that dynamic rerouting and such. So it all boils down to, the ability to have some of the common themes that come out are, real-time communication, real-time tracking, right? Automating a bunch of the workflows. If something goes wrong, suddenly plan B rolls into action. Also feedback loops, right? Sometimes you don't even know things are going wrong, but something happened in the field somewhere, nobody knows, and there's no feedback loop, and you just say, oh, if only we knew, we could have fixed it, kind of thing. And sort of at different levels, reports, visibility, tracking. So it just kind of boils down to a lot of the just automating a lot of these processes, and companies, many of these e-commerce companies, sort of behind the scenes, right? On the website, all of us can see what they're doing, but behind the scenes, they are investing massive amount of engineering, technology, automation, and so on to optimize this sort of the invisible portion of the business. Okay, and in particular, unlike India or even China, we think of it as an emerging market, so we compare and say same population size and it's got to be the same thing. But there are some things very different. I mean, we'll start with infrastructure, right? And hopefully it'll change with the new government and so on. But things work, right? Trains, things work in China, I was saying. Roads, planes, trains. It gets from point A to point B in the designated time, and you can, with a very high degree of confidence say you'll get there. But here, low internet penetration, infrastructure and logistics, I mean, we're all too familiar with it. Also, people liking, cash on delivery for online or even offline, the guy down the street, comfort and so on. So exactly. So I think a lot of challenges out here. So let me just, in the interest of time, keep speeding it up a little bit. So I'm not going to talk much about what we do, but just a tiny bit of context before I just share a few customer examples is, so we focus a lot on mobile messaging. We have a product, Gupshup, which offers unified messaging APIs for communication to customers, and another app, Team Chat, for team communications inside the organization. And the point was, I wanted to share some case studies. Do you have a couple minutes? Okay. Just very quickly, there's banks using it when they get a lead from somebody wanting to renew their life insurance policy. The ability to it depends on from the call center to the area manager to the field service officer to picking up the documents required by law. All of that being automated. Travel companies sort of focusing on facility. I think Pranav was talking about it earlier, focusing on messaging with multiple people, making a collaborative decision as a family. Even sort of taxi companies using messaging for communicating between the headquarters, the managed supervisors, if you will, and the drivers themselves, for distributed field teams and management as well. And like I mentioned, a lot of the warehousing issues around stock, people, vehicles, keeping track of things and everything that's here. Customer notifications, very important portion. I think it was covered in the earlier panel, so I'll just skip that. But this can be a big driver of driving things. And then of course, just a lot of alerts. Some of them required by law, but some of them drive a lot of repetition. So I think that's it. I mean, that's the last slide. But the point is, with messaging, whether it's messaging to consumers or messaging internally within their own teams, and real-time tracking and coordination, I think it can drive, it can contribute significantly to reducing the cost of operations and then achieving profitability. Okay, thank you.